The cream-colored envelope felt heavy in my hand, heavier than it had any right to be. Charles and Bethany. Their names, entwined in sickly sweet calligraphy, were a brand seared onto the soft tissue of my past. 2 years, a divorce, and a minor corporate takeover later, they wanted me at their wedding. As if I were some antique vase they'd finally decided was chic again. Hi everyone, welcome to Revenge Echo. Let's get started. The invitation arrived like a poisoned bonbon, nestled amongst the usual junk mail and Pottery Barn catalogs. Creamy cardstock, embossed with their entwined initials, C&B, a nauseatingly sweet monogram for Charles and Bethany. Bethany. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. It was addressed to Ms. Vivian Holloway, a title that still felt foreign, sharp-edged, and powerful on my tongue, a stark contrast to the soft, yielding Mrs. Charles Ashton I'd shed like a snakeskin 2 years prior. My first instinct was the primal urge to set it ablaze. Watch the delicate script curl and blacken, mirroring the slow burn of resentment that still flickered within me. But then, a cooler, more calculating part of my brain, the CO part, the part that negotiated multi-million-dollar deals and stared down hostile board members, took over. This wasn't just an invitation, it was a statement. A taunt. And Vivian Holloway didn't cower. Vivian Holloway strategized. Charles and I had been college sweethearts, the kind of sickeningly in-love couple that made everyone else roll their eyes. We built a life, a comfortable suburban existence punctuated by weekend trips and dinner parties with the same predictable friends. He was reliable, predictable, and, apparently, easily swayed by a blonde with the emotional depth of a puddle. The affair had been cliché in its execution, devastating in its impact. Bethany, the bright young paralegal at his firm, all wide-eyed admiration and breathless laughter. I'd found the text messages, of course. The saccharine emojis, the late-night excuses, the lingering scent of cheap perfume on his collar. He denied it vehemently, until the evidence was undeniable, a digital trail of his betrayal laid bare on his pristine iPhone. The divorce was swift, brutal, and public. Our friends took sides, the carefully constructed facade of our perfect life shattering into a million sharp pieces. I retreated, licking my wounds, pouring every ounce of my energy into the small tech startup I'd co-founded years ago. It was my refuge, my distraction, my slow, deliberate climb back to solid ground. And climb I did. Holloway Tech exploded. We'd tapped into a niche market, our software becoming indispensable for a surprising range of industries. Late nights turned into early mornings, stress fueled innovation, and the sting of Charles's betrayal became a dull ache, overshadowed by the exhilarating rush of success. Now, 2 years later, I was Vivian Holloway, CO. My name graced magazine covers. My opinion was sought after. I wore power suits that cost more than Charles's entire wardrobe. And now Charles, my utterly unremarkable ex-husband, was marrying the woman he'd left me for. The wedding was set to be a lavish affair at some vineyard an hour outside the city. The kind of place we'd always dreamed of for our wedding, a dream he was now fulfilling with someone else. The irony wasn't lost on me. My assistant, Sarah, a whirlwind of efficient energy, laid out my options. Decline, obviously. Send a polite, unable to attend. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass of single malt, the expensive kind I now enjoyed without guilt. No, Sarah. I'm going. Sarah's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. Vivian, are you sure? This sounds masochistic. Perhaps I conceded, a small, unsettling smile playing on my lips. Or perhaps it's an opportunity. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in controlled chaos. I needed the perfect dress, something that screamed understated power, not desperate revenge. I settled on a sleek, midnight blue gown by a designer Bethany wouldn't recognize, tailored to perfection to accentuate the physique I'd honed through relentless early morning workouts. My plus one was equally crucial. I considered a few options, a charming venture capitalist I'd recently met, a renowned journalist who could subtly document the event for posterity. But in the end, I chose Eleanor Vance, my chief operating officer. Eleanor was sharp, unflappable, and possessed a dry wit that could deflate even the most inflated egos. Plus, she knew the full, unvarnished story of my divorce and wouldn't hesitate to offer a cutting remark if the situation warranted it. The day of the wedding dawned bright and unervingly perfect. As Sarah meticulously applied my makeup, I felt a strange sense of detachment. This wasn't the heartbroken Vivian of 2 years ago. This was a different woman, forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by success. The drive to the vineyard was scenic, rolling hills dotted with meticulously manicured vines. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, reviewed quarterly reports in the passenger seat. Her presence was a grounding force, a reminder of the life I had built, a life that had nothing to do with Charles Ashton. The vineyard was everything I'd imagined, rustic yet elegant, with sweeping views and the faint scent of blooming roses. Valet attendants whisked away our car, and as we walked towards the ceremony site, I could feel the weight of curious gazes. The Ashton-Holloway divorce had been local gossip fodder, and my unexpected attendance was undoubtedly the main topic of conversation. I spotted Charles almost immediately. He looked older. The carefree boyishness I'd once loved had been replaced by a nervous energy, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to go wrong. He was talking to his best man, a man I'd once considered a close friend, who now offered a strained, uncomfortable smile in my direction. And then there was Bethany. She was exactly as I remembered, blonde, bubbly, and radiating an almost aggressively cheerful aura. Her wedding dress was a frothy confection of lace and tulle, the kind of dress a woman wears when she wants to be the center of attention. Which, of course, she did. As Eleanor and I found seats towards the back, I could feel Bethany's eyes on me. A brief, almost imperceptible flicker of something, triumph? Insecurity? Crossed her face before she turned back to her conversation. The ceremony was agonizingly predictable. Vows filled with clichés about soulmates and forever, readings that sounded lifted from a greeting card. Charles's voice wavered slightly as he spoke, and I wondered if, for a fleeting moment, he felt a pang of regret. Or perhaps it was just nerves. It was always hard to tell with Charles. He was a master of surface-level emotions. During the exchange of rings, Bethany's hand trembled. Her smile seemed a little too wide, her eyes a little too bright. It struck me then that perhaps her victory wasn't as complete as she wanted everyone to believe. Perhaps she knew, on some level, that she was a replacement, a shiny new model while the original still existed, upgraded and undeniably more powerful. The reception was held in a large, airy barn decorated with fairy lights and overflowing floral arrangements. The air buzzed with forced laughter and polite conversation. As we navigated the crowd, I was met with a mix of surprised greetings and awkward silences. Old friends, unsure of how to act, offered hesitant congratulations. Charles approached us, Bethany clinging to his arm like a particularly enthusiastic barnacle. He looked genuinely surprised to see me, a flicker of his old, familiar discomfort washing over his face. "Vivian," he said, his voice a little too loud. I didn't expect to see you here." "Charles," I replied, my voice calm and even. "Congratulations. You both look happy." The word felt like a foreign object in my mouth. Bethany's smile tightened. "Vivian, it's so lovely of you to come." Her voice was high and brittle, like spun sugar. "We were so surprised." "Oh, I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I said, my eyes meeting hers directly. There was a subtle shift in her expression, a flicker of unease behind the bright facade. She knew I wasn't here to offer heartfelt congratulations. "Vivian is a CEO now, Bethany," Eleanor interjected smoothly, her tone laced with a hint of steel. "Her schedule is incredibly demanding, so the fact that she made time for this speaks volumes." Bethany's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Oh, how wonderful. Charles always said you were very ambitious." "Ambitious and successful," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." Charles shifted uncomfortably. "Well, it's great to see you doing so well, Vivian." "The company is thriving," I confirmed. "We just closed a major deal last week. It's quite exhilarating." I allowed a small, genuine smile to touch my lips as I thought of the late nights and hard work that had led to that victory. A victory that had nothing to do with him. The conversation continued in this vein for a few more excruciating minutes, a carefully choreographed dance of veiled barbs and forced pleasantries. Bethany kept her grip on Charles's arm tight, her eyes darting between us like a nervous spectator at a tennis match. As the evening wore on, the alcohol flowed freely, and the carefully constructed politeness began to fray at the edges. I mingled, made small talk, and even shared a few strained laughs with people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everywhere I went, I could feel the undercurrent of curiosity, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Why is she here? Is she going to make a scene? Is she still heartbroken? The answer to the last question was a resounding no. The ache was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of satisfaction. I had moved on. I had built something meaningful. I was no longer defined by my relationship with Charles Ashton. Later, as the band played a syrupy love song, I found myself standing near the edge of the dance floor, watching Charles and Bethany sway in each other's arms. Bethany's head was nestled against his chest, her blonde hair a stark contrast to his thinning dark locks. They looked ordinary. Utterly, disappointingly ordinary. A wave of something unexpected washed over me. Not sadness, not anger, but a profound sense of pity. Pity for Bethany, who had built her happiness on the ruins of someone else's life. Pity for Charles, who had traded a comfortable, if somewhat predictable, existence for this manufactured fairy tale. Eleanor joined me, a knowing look in her eyes. Well, this is certainly something. Underwhelming, mostly, I replied, taking a sip of my champagne. Think they'll last? She asked, her gaze fixed on the dancing couple. I shrugged. Who knows? Who cares? They're perfectly matched in their mediocrity. As the night drew to a close, the bride and groom prepared for their grand exit, a shower of rose petals raining down upon them. Charles caught my eye across the room, a fleeting expression of something unreadable on his face. Regret? Relief? It didn't matter. I turned to Eleanor. Ready to go? Absolutely, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. Let's leave the happy couple to their happiness. As we walked towards the exit, I paused for a moment and looked back at the wedding reception. The fairy lights twinkled, the music played on, and the guests continued to celebrate. It was a picture of conventional bliss, a scene I was no longer a part of. Stepping out into the cool night air, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't anticipated. Attending the wedding hadn't been about revenge or closure. It had been about witnessing the final chapter of a life I had outgrown. It had been a quiet declaration of my own transformation. As the valet brought our car around, Eleanor turned to me. So, she said, a sly smile on her face. What's next, CEO Holloway? I looked out at the star-dusted sky, a sense of exhilaration bubbling within me. Next, I said, we conquer the world. And as we drove away, leaving the sounds of the wedding behind, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I meant it. The poisoned bonbon had been swallowed, and somehow, impossibly, it had nourished me. The life I had now was richer, more complex, and infinitely more satisfying than the one I had shared with Charles. And for that, I realized with a detached sense of amusement, I almost had to thank him. Almost.